Welcome back to the deep dive.
Hello.
This is where we really get into some dense, fascinating material, try to pull out those key insights for you.
Exactly. And today? Well, today's source is really something else. Quite unique.
It really is. We're stepping into what the author calls a Multiverse Journal entry. It's dated June 15th, 2025.
Right.
And the title is Holy Memories, Memories That Do Not Fit in This Soul Path.
Yeah, and it's not like a fictional diary. He presents it as insights and re-remembered experiences from other realities, other soul paths, as he puts it.
And this specific entry gives us this, well, profound, something pretty unsettling, definitely challenging look at one person's spiritual journey, interwoven with this huge critique of modern society and even like radical reinterpretations of history and theology. It's a lot.
It is a lot. And our mission today really is to navigate this incredibly rich, a very dense narrative.
Yeah.
This author lays out a worldview that's, well, it's deeply personal, but also strikingly apocalyptic. He connects his own private spiritual events to this unique theological framework and a really fervent critique of modern life.
So what we're trying to do here is understand his perspective.
Right.
Understand the arguments.
Precisely. We want to extract the most, potent insights and the challenging ideas for you, the listener. But, and this is important, without necessarily endorsing the specific viewpoint.
Absolutely. No endorsement.
Think of it as a journey into a very particular, very intense cosmology. We'll explore his logic, his claims, the connections he makes.
Startling connections sometimes.
Oh, definitely startling. And we'll be careful to always distinguish his unique terms, his framework, from, more conventional understandings.
And it's quite a journey he lays out. Some astonishing claims, connecting dots in ways that sometimes you can see the internal consistency,
Right.
But other times the implications are just deeply unsettling. So we'll guide you through it, highlight those connections, the main arguments he's making. Okay, let's unpack this. So our journey into this multiverse journal, it starts with this really pivotal, really transformative experience. He calls it a holy experience and an ego death. Happened about 10 years ago, he says. And he claims it, quote, stripped my family demon from me that had assisted in preventing my understanding, my clarity, my memories of holy and worldly, and other mental faculties.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And this event, he says, it forced him to finally confront what he calls a life-crippling betrayal and psychological abuse from her that birthed me.
So his mother.
Right.
It sounds incredibly intense, a really deep, personal, traumatic turning point, it seems.
It truly does sound intense. And the way he frames it, it's not just psychological, not just an emotional breakdown. He sees it as a spiritual reset.
The reset.
Yeah. Now, ego death, that's a concept we hear in, various spiritual traditions, psychology maybe.
But here, the author describes it as, well, a highly literal spiritual purification. He actually talks about stripping his family demon.
Right, that specific phrase.
And in his framework, that's not just a metaphor for, internal struggles.
Yeah.
He seems to view it as an actual entity.
An entity.
Apparently.
Yeah.
One that had actively blocked his understanding, his clarity, for most of his life. So this experience was, he believes, a direct intervention.
Divine intervention.
Seems to be how he sees it. And it rapidly rebuilt his ego. Not ego in, a narcissistic way.
No, right.
But more like it gave him the courage, the strength to face things he couldn't before, things he was maybe too weak or, in his view, too spiritually blinded to confront.
And he paints it as really fast, doesn't he?
Extremely fast.
Yeah.
He says perhaps only a few seconds,
Yeah.
which is remarkable, leading to this profound awakening.
Just like that, a few seconds.
Yeah. And this reset, it also cleared away, in his words, falseness and unclarity. That's what allowed him to finally understand the suffering he'd endured in his past.
So a sudden, almost violent purification, it sounds like. A rapid illumination.
That's the picture he paints. Suddenly seeing his history in a new light, though maybe a painful one.
And the physical description he gives. Curling into a fetal position. It makes it feel so visceral,
It does. It grounds this monumental, deeply personal crisis. And it wasn't just about his own life, was it? It led to something broader.
Exactly. It opened his eyes, he says, to this much wider, more sinister sickness throughout the world. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Have you, the listener, ever had a moment of clarity like that? So intense, it just reshapes your whole past, peels back layers you didn't know existed.
It's a powerful idea.
And for him, this personal epiphany, it wasn't just self-knowledge, it was the key to seeing this global sickness.
Precisely. So after this ego death, which he really does frame as divine intervention, he says he understood, capital U, the truth of Satan.
Again, capital T, capital S, specific meaning for him.
Right. Not just an intellectual discovery, more like a revelation that shifted his whole reality. And the direct consequence, he felt compelled to accept fully the truth of God as more active in my life.
Wow. So from personal suffering straight to cosmic understanding.
It's a striking leap, isn't it?
Yeah.
It immediately frames his entire worldview within this, well, grand cosmic struggle. Good versus evil. Very clear sides in his mind.
And everyone's involved.
Everyone. He realized, he says, that everyone, without exception, is deeply involved in what he calls a spiritual battle without limits.
It's a spiritual battle without limits.
Yeah. It signifies a complete reorientation for him, recognizing this active, ongoing spiritual war that he believes we're all participants in, whether we know it or not.
And what's really fascinating here, he talks about getting an offer around this time.
An offer.
Yeah, like a temptation, it sounds like, to accept back his family demon, the one that was supposedly stripped away, and just forget all these uncomfortable new truths, go back to how things were.
Wow, like a test.
Exactly. But he refused. He writes in the journal that he realized his past weakness, his inability to face these things. It hadn't just harmed him, it harmed, quote, all peoples.
So a sense of wider responsibility.
Yeah, it suggests this powerful commitment to something bigger than himself. His personal struggle was tied to this universal battle. Refusing the offer was, for him, an act of spiritual responsibility, not just for himself, but for everyone.
That's a heavy burden to take on.
Yeah.
The core insight here, from his viewpoint, seems to be that accepting profound personal suffering, especially if you understand it in this larger spiritual context, maybe with divine help,
Right.
it can be this powerful catalyst for understanding universal truths. It's like his individual pain, once unmasked, purified, became a key to this much bigger, maybe overwhelming reality.
Unlocking a whole new level of perception.
Exactly. Understanding the truth of Satan, accepting God's active presence, it meant a complete life reorientation.
Yeah.
Recognizing this spiritual war and this newfound clarity, this deep spiritual engagement, it didn't just light up his past. It led to what he describes as these extraordinary forms of communication and perception. It's a clear shift from internal revelation to external observation and critique.
And this personal revelation, this ego death, it definitely didn't happen in a bubble for him. It seems to have fueled this really radical, really uncompromising critique of society itself.
Yes, definitely.
He laments what he sees as this profound erosion, sanity, virtue, trust, all gone in his view. He contrasts things really vividly.
Oh, so?
He says, as an older boy in the early 1970s, a state of sanity and a general universal trust of basic virtues existed, like a basic shared understanding of right and wrong.
Okay, baseline.
But then he says, this foundation, it was just gone by the time he was at university in mid to late 1980s.
Gone. That's a rapid shift he's described.
Very rapid.
Yeah,
A fundamental societal breakdown within, like, a single generation in his eyes.
And does he say why it happened? What caused this breakdown?
He does. And this is where it gets, well, very controversial. He attributes this profound transformation to, quote, womanhood becoming both sickened and hyper-empowered.
Okay, sickened and hyper-empowered. That's
Yeah.
strong language.
Very. And he argues this led directly to a rejection of basic sanity and virtue that valued truth, justice, good order, prudence, courage.
So specific virtues he thinks were lost.
Yes. Virtues he believes were once, quote, blessed the world by what he calls the white Christian West, and were enforced and expected by men and older raised women. Now, he claims these virtues were systematically lost.
So it's a very specific diagnosis, pinpointing a particular group, a particular historical period as the turning point for this decline he sees.
Exactly. And he doesn't see it as just, natural societal change. He sees it as a direct assault on society's moral fabric, leading to this kind of collective spiritual illness.
A deliberate assault, almost.
That's how he frames it. He describes the loss not as some accidental drift, but as a silent and not so silent coordinated gaslighting, history rewriting.
Coordinated gaslighting.
Right.
Wow. That implies intent, doesn't it? A deliberate effort to redefine reality, warp perceptions.
It does. Active manipulation of public discourse, history, The whole narrative, it really makes you stop and think, Have you, listener, ever felt that? A noticeable shift, a generational change in what society considers normal or virtuous, like the goalposts just moved.
It's a common feeling, I think, for many people looking across generations.
But the author argues it's not just a feeling, it's a real decline, a descent into collective sickness. And this leads to maybe the most controversial part of his critique.
Which is?
The widespread acceptance of what he considers outright insanity.
Okay, so his argument about accepting insanity as normal, even praiseworthy, he sees this as a direct symptom of that societal sickness he diagnosed.
Exactly. And he gives a prime example. He cites the legal acceptance and social practice of the clearly insane of mothers hiring murderers dressed as medical professionals to torture to death our unborn babies silently screaming on whim.
Okay, that's incredibly stark language. Uncompromising. Abortion as the prime example of insanity being normalized.
Yes. It's central to his argument about the profound moral and spiritual decay he sees. He uses this specific example to illustrate what he perceives as a complete breakdown of moral limits, of shared humanity.
And he argues this acceptance, it broke all limits of what should and was unacceptable.
He does. And to hammer the point home, he makes this really powerful emotional contrast. He says, back in the day, the suffering of a single burned running Vietnam child moved entire nations to actions. Remember that photo?
Yes, iconic. Very powerful.
But today, he claims, most all are silently accepting of genocides that our taxes and resources support.
It's a huge claim. Comparing the reaction to one child's suffering then to perceived acceptance of genocide now.
It underscores his belief that societies become desensitized, especially for him when it comes to the unborn. And he really believes a direct side effect of accepting these things he calls insanities is a fundamental failure to trust others.
So it erodes social cohesion.
Completely. Makes genuine connection impossible in his view. So the big question then is, what does he think is driving this profound decay?
Right. What's the root cause, according to him?
Well, he dives deep into something he calls female evil. And it's a very stark, very critical picture he paints.
Okay, so transitioning from societal sickness to this concept of female evil. This sounds extremely provocative.
It is. He lays out this truly controversial claim, arguing for what he perceives as a constant witch spell from crib.
A witch spell from crib. What does he mean by that?
He states this spell, as he calls it, has led to this pervasive narrative in society, one where men, are portrayed as privileged and powerful only because of oppression and injustice, and that they're inherently rotten and bad. While conversely, he asserts, womanhood reputation gets falsely glorified, their negative actions excused, even celebrated.
So it's not just a social observation for him. He sees it as a spiritual phenomenon, this witch spell.
Exactly. It's presented as, in his words, a very female form of evil and system of unjust, false witness-based reputational destruction.
Wow. Reputational destruction.
Yeah. He argues that children, especially those he calls fatherless children, are raised from the start, from the crib, to believe in a faultless mother, and crucially, not to question abuse coming from women.
So this narrative, he thinks, causes profound crippling. Intellectually, emotionally.
That's his claim, preventing people from understanding truth, leading to confusion, suffering. The core idea is that this isn't just, a societal trend or changing gender roles.
No.
He sees it as systematic, deliberate, even malicious. A campaign of reputation destruction rooted in this specific form of evil he identifies.
Does he give examples?
He does. Specific examples from his own observations, alleging this narrative fosters the belief that, quote, male and eventually men should not be trusted, should be feared and punished for always being internally rotten and bad.
So it frames gender relations as deeply adversarial, spiritually charged even.
Very much so. This witch spell, he believes, instills deep distrust in men while simultaneously absolving women of responsibility. It really forces you to consider, doesn't it? How do prevailing narratives about gender shape our understanding of blame, virtue, power dynamics, especially when seen through such a distinct and, frankly, extreme lens?
It's a challenging perspective, to say the least. And this deep-seated belief in female evil, it directly informs how he views feminism, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. His view on feminism is particularly harsh. He describes having this lightning strike realization.
Which was?
That feminist was an excuse for unearned profits of any form and an excuse to act without moral and virtues to advance, and it was always so.
Okay, so not just a critique of a movement. For him, it's a fundamental reinterpretation of its very essence, its purpose, seen through that spiritual lens of his own trauma and awakening.
Right. He sees it not as about equality, but as a system designed for unearned advantages, providing moral cover for what he perceives as destructive behavior. And this realization, he notes, was crucial for him understanding the broader societal sickness.
And he links it directly to his own life, doesn't he? His personal crippling.
Explicitly, he talks about being poisoned with feminism from a young age. For him, it wasn't just some abstract belief system out there.
No.
It was a destructive force, something he felt actively prevented him from understanding his own suffering, that life-crippling betrayal he mentioned earlier, and the deeper truths he only uncovered later.
So a very visceral connection, a social movement as an ideological toxin that warped his early life.
That's how he presents it. And a crucial consequence of this female evil, according to him, is the systematic destruction of traditional male roles, particularly fatherhood.
Right. This brings us to another central and equally controversial argument he makes, the assault on fatherhood and what he starkly calls the castration of manhood.
Castration. Strong word again.
Very. He argues that no-fault divorce legally established state and social support for the sin of Eve.
Okay, invoking the sin of Eve.
With the threat of and often the act of divorce rates and taking of all we as fathers loved. Now, divorce rape, that term needs careful handling.
Yes. What does he mean by that in this context?
Within his framework, he seems to use it to describe not physical violation, but what he perceives as a profound legal, emotional, financial violation during divorce, where fathers, in his view, are stripped of their children, assets, their role, regardless of fault.
A total stripping away.
That's his perception. And this, he states flatly, killed fatherhood and castrated manhood. He sees it as a fundamental breakdown of the family, with devastating societal consequences rippling down through generations.
And he contrasts this current state with something from the past.
He does. He talks about the raw love that a more gentle form our fathers, men teachers, men mentors, older brothers, and even men friends used to do before fatherhood was killed.
So painting a picture of a past where men, especially fathers, provided this essential guidance, this unwavering love that society needed.
Exactly. And for him, true fatherhood, quote, only exists in marriages where the wife and mother would never divorce on pain of sin and death.
Wow. That's an incredibly rigid definition of marital commitment.
It is, rooted in a belief that anything less just completely undermines the father's sacred, irreplaceable role. He believes the widespread acceptance of no-fault divorce leaves generations raised by, in his words, increasingly insane, accepting, delusional, and psychotic mothers.
Harsh.
Very harsh language, leading to damaged men and consequently a profoundly damaged society overall.
And what's particularly striking, too, is his point about the complicity of silence.
Ah, yes. Explain that.
He claims that even if only, say, 3 in 10 women are what he controversially calls demonic-possessed witches, which seems to be his term for a deeply corrupted, malevolent spiritual state. The real damnation, he says, lies in the silence of most all other 10 women who silently or actively support those rotted, demonic-possessed witches.
So, collective responsibility. Passive acceptance is as bad as active participation, in his view.
That's the implication. A powerful, deeply critical accusation against a huge part of society. It really makes you ask, what does happen to a society when, in one person's view, fundamental family roles are undermined, even attacked, leading to this perceived spiritual and moral collapse?
So it's a heavy question. And this widespread female evil he describes, it doesn't just operate personally or filially, does it?
Yeah.
He argues it's infiltrated major institutions.
Exactly, including one of the oldest and, for many, most revered.
So the author takes this critique beyond just societal trends or gender dynamics. He makes this truly astonishing claim about institutional corruption.
He does. He condemns what he specifically calls the modernist false Catholic Church.
False Catholic Church, okay.
And states, with absolute conviction, that the synagogue of Satan took over the office of Pope in the Vatican back in 1958.
Wow. 1958. That is a monumental claim, challenging the legitimacy, the spiritual authority of a major global institution, saying it's compromised by, well, by Satan, essentially.
Synagogue of Satan is his specific term for the entity he believes took over.
Right, and his interpretation of Vatican II is fascinating, isn't it, in this light?
Very. He doesn't see it as, reform or renewal, which is the common understanding.
Yeah, he views it as a public presentation that Vatican ruled by Satan in the acceptance of heresy-filled Vatican II.
Heresy-filled?
Yes. He specifically criticizes the big change, the forced change from traditional Latin Mass rite to the new rite worldwide. He calls that change abusive and intended to harm the body of Christ on earth, to murder souls, to prevent converts, and sow distrust and division.
So deliberate sabotage from within, with the goal of destroying faith, causing spiritual harm. It's not just about liturgy for him, it's a spiritual weapon.
It's exactly how he frames it, wielded by Satan through this compromised church leadership.
And his personal experience? It seems deeply tied into this belief.
How so?
He mentions being abused by a powerful woman within this modernist church, and for him, that experience confirmed his suspicions about its corruption.
Ah.
And ultimately, it led him to convert to what he calls the traditional Catholic Church, which he refers to as the true church.
So a deeply personal justification for his theological stance. His own suffering becomes the lens for interpreting these huge institutional shifts.
Exactly. It raises that question, doesn't it? When belief systems face these profound internal divisions, especially when one side claims the other is literally controlled by evil. What does that mean for people seeking truth, seeking guidance within them?
It's incredibly disorienting, I imagine. And of course, the author doesn't stop with the church, does he? This infiltration idea goes further.
No, not at all. He expands this concept, the synagogue of Satan, making it the orchestrator of widespread evil throughout history, claiming it's been killing the best of white Christian men since before the French Revolution.
Okay, so this entity is the hidden hand behind centuries of suffering, directing events towards a specific sinister goal. Not random history, but a deliberate campaign.
That's his argument. And he presents this truly radical reframing of major historical events.
Like what?
He argues that the French Revolution, Civil War, WWI, Armenian Genocide, Holodomor, WWII, Middle Eastern Wars, events we usually understand through complex political, economic, social forces.
Right. Standard historical analysis.
He says they all had white Christian men and family genocide as a main goal.
Wow. That is a striking revisionist history.
Yeah.
Suggesting a targeted long-term conspiracy.
A very specific one. He even connects it to today. He states, today we have Holodomor Part 2 that has mass murdered an estimated 1.5 million white Christian Ukrainian men and a fraction but large number of Russian white Christian men.
Goodness, that's a chilling assertion, applying this conspiratorial framework to current events.
And he describes this controlling entity, this synagogue of Satan, as ruling worldly aspects through perhaps 15 international interconnected worldwide families, operating via what he calls witches and minions.
So an incredibly detailed, pervasive conspiracy theory. It fundamentally challenges mainstream historical understanding, doesn't it?
Completely. How do claims like these challenge conventional narratives, and what might that imply about how history gets shaped and told, especially if you were to entertain the possibility, even hypothetically, of such a hidden influence?
It certainly makes you question assumptions about historical causality. And this pervasive conspiracy, in his view, it also controls information itself, right? To keep things hidden.
Exactly. He says there's a constant witch spell that leads us to decide there is no patterns and that most things are random and senseless.
That witch spell again. A spiritual deception obscuring evil.
That's his term for it, yeah. Actively working to hide the true nature of evil, he argues ignorance cannot be claimed regarding what he sees as clear public signs, like his interpretation of Vatican II as a public statement of satanic rule. He thinks the signs are there, but this spell prevents people seeing the patterns.
Deliberate obfuscation.
And he gives concrete examples he believes show this information suppression, linking it directly to big corporations.
Like Google.
Yes. He claims studies showing high levels of parental fraud, like 1 in 3, and high rates of false rape accusations used to be easy to find on Google.
Okay.
But then, he says, they were suppressed by Google. And for him, this confirms his belief that female evil and service to synagogue of Satan had moved into international corporations.
Connecting it back to female evil.
Yes, and that the male hate and lie that the UN states modernist Catholic Church lies and implies, basically, that no sources of power we once trusted could be trusted anymore.
So the corruption is total, in his view, seeping into everything, even supposedly neutral information sources.
It raises a tough question for all of us, really. In a world saturated with information, how do you verify claims? Especially when powerful entities are accused, in one person's view, of such widespread manipulation and suppression.
It's a critical challenge. And with all of that as the background, the societal decay, the institutional infiltration, the hidden conspiracies, we get to one of the most unique, most fascinating parts of this deep dive.
Absolutely. The author's encounter with a spiritual entity he simply calls the lion.
Right, so after the ego death, after his spiritual eyes were open as he sees it, he describes receiving this profound, systematic communication.
From the lion.
From the lion, yes. And he's clear, it wasn't like hearing an audible voice.
No. How then?
He describes it as a systematic re-remembering, like suddenly recalling a sentence, an image, or concept, as if I was systematically remembering something I always knew but had forgotten.
Like a download of lost knowledge, gradually revealed, not spoken.
That's a good way to put it. And he notes that the lion had this openness and simplicity that argued truth, which, despite his caution...
Because he's wary of demonic forces, right?
Exactly. But the nature of this communication convinced him it was genuine, truthful. But crucially, he clarifies, the lion was not Jesus Christ, nor did he claim any such thing.
Okay, so a distinct entity. Powerful, authoritative in his view, but separate from the Son of God.
Precisely. Positioning the lion uniquely within his evolving theology. It makes you think, doesn't it? Imagine having deeply forgotten knowledge suddenly flood back into you, not from study, but from this internal remembering. What would that feel like? How would it reshape your reality, your place in it?
Mind-bending. And the author's interpretation of who the lion actually is, well, this is truly extraordinary. One of the most radical claims in the whole journal.
It really is. This is where the narrative takes an astonishing turn, deeply challenging for many traditional views.
He suggests the lion might be the figure mentioned in Revelation, St. John's testimony.
Okay.
But his most striking theological argument, a monumental conceptual shift, is that the lion is the transformed soul of Cain. Cain, as in Adam and Eve's son, killed his brother Abel, Cain.
That Cain.
Wow. Okay. That is a truly radical reinterpretation of a foundational biblical story. How does he explain that?
Well, he describes Cain's punishment for killing Abel not as simple damnation, not eternal hell,
No.
but as this unique, profound form of purgatory, a concept he details meticulously. Cain, in this framework, was killed by God, not physically, more a spiritual judgment, and then forced to host a world where his sins are widely suffered by most or all.
Host a world. What does that mean?
He explains this hosting involves Cain's body, mind, soul, blood being metaphorically eaten for the world's existence. Metaphorically. Meaning, as the host, Cain literally feels the pain, the motivations, the consequences of every sin committed by every person on earth.
Good grief. That sounds unimaginable.
He describes it starting as a burning agony. But slowly, through this process, it led to Cain's acceptance and understanding that it is just and right. He argues this whole process is purgatory. So purgatory isn't just a place, it's this specific ongoing atonement process for Cain.
Exactly. Where Cain comes to hate all sins from personal sufferings, yet to love everyone in a non-infinite manner, but similar to Jesus Christ's love of us all.
Wow. So the first murderer becomes intricately linked to the suffering and salvation of all humanity through this incredibly severe yet redemptive process.
It's an incredibly imaginative framework, severe atonement leading to redemption.
And the ultimate claim is even more breathtaking, isn't it? Challenging traditional theology profoundly.
It is. He argues that Cain was transformed through hosting all sins in peoples over millennia, this cosmic purgation, until Jesus was conceived. And then, the lion, I argue, was the template of the human part that was joined with the Son of the Trinity to be Jesus Christ, both God and man.
Wait, so Cain transformed, became the human template for Jesus Christ.
That's his assertion. Cain's unique purgatorial suffering and transformation made him the literal human pattern for Christ's humanity.
That is profound. A profound reinterpretation of Scripture, divine justice, the incarnation itself. How does an idea like that even begin to challenge traditional theological understanding? It pushes boundaries. What might it suggest about the ultimate nature of redemption, if true?
Huge questions. And this unique connection with the lion, it gave him more than just these astonishing theological ideas.
Right. The communication itself was significant for him. The lion communicated raw truth, he says, without excessive sympathy.
And he saw that directness as a good sign.
Yes. A hallmark of genuine truth. Unlike the falseness and attempt at manipulation for evil reasons he saw everywhere else. It bolstered his confidence in the entity even though he remained cautious. That lack of emotional manipulation felt authentic to him.
And there was a test, too, wasn't there? A test of possession.
Ah, yes. The lion apparently offered to possess me and do it for me, regarding the author's goal to battle Satan.
Offered to take over.
Essentially. But the author rejected absolutely. He saw it as a crucial test of his own duty, to himself and God. He suspected it might have been from a fallen demonic being trying to usurp his free will.
Wow. Speaks to his sense of personal responsibility, spiritual discernment, not taking the easy way out, even in such extraordinary circumstances.
Definitely. And beyond these direct communications and tests, the insights from the lion also included these. Memories of different lives. This feeds into his whole Multiverse Journal concept.
Right, other versions of himself.
Yes. He describes them as other versions of me in different lives, like windows that had numbers beyond count that I could enter and watch and even replace and experience.
Enter and experience, like traveling between lives.
That's how it sounds. And he notes these other lives were often more so sane, true, just than this sick, dark, false reality he feels he's currently in.
Suggesting our reality is just one path, maybe a particularly corrupted one, in a vast spiritual multiverse.
Exactly. A multidimensional spiritual existence.
And he describes his consciousness expanding during this, like a large room where light is only near me that got brighter, bigger, eventually revealing a window doorway into eternity.
It's a powerful image.
The whole idea that our reality might be just one of countless soul paths. It's mind-bending, challenges our understanding of existence, identity, choice, consequence.
It really does. And these profound insights, these spiritual battles, these multiversal memories, they form this unique backdrop for his starkest condemnation of modern society, focusing acutely on what he sees as its ultimate moral failure.
So, for the author, all this societal decline, the female evil, the spiritual warfare, it all seems to culminate, to find its sharpest focus in one central evil: abortion.
Right. This seems to be the linchpin of his critique.
And he describes it in incredibly graphic, very emotionally charged language. Mothers hiring murderers dressed as medical professionals to torture to death our unborn babies, silently screaming on whim.
Extremely strong wording. He doesn't hold back.
Not at all. And he doesn't just see it as a societal practice. He connects the 1973 Roe v. Wade SCOTUS ruling directly to, well, he calls it a public announcement that Satan rules the federal government through the SCOTUS ruling.
Wow.
Forcing us all to suffer a national forced religious practice of unborn tortured to death, silently screaming sacrifices to Satan.
Okay, that is an incredibly direct, severe, spiritually loaded condemnation, framing a legal decision as a satanic imposition on the entire nation.
Yeah.
A forced religious practice of sacrifice.
Exactly. And he argues that this act, the widespread practice of abortion, it broke all limits of what should and was unacceptable. For him, it's the ultimate indicator of this profound fall of sanity, love, joy, truth, justice, hope, and faith in society.
So this single act encapsulates the whole spiritual sickness he's been detailing, not just a moral failing, but a direct manifestation of the evil forces he believes are active, a public sign of their dominion.
A societal descent into depravity, in his view, defying reason, compassion.
And he again uses that contrast to emphasize the desensitization, doesn't he?
He does. Comparing the acceptance of abortion today with the time when a single burned, running Vietnam child moved entire nations to actions, the implication is clear. A society once moved by one child's suffering, now, in his view, condones what he sees as mass atrocity.
It really forces you to grapple with a difficult idea. How do we process the notion that certain societal practices, maybe widely accepted or legal, could be interpreted by someone like this as direct manifestations of evil, even as sacrifices to Satan?
It's deeply uncomfortable, and given such an extreme perspective, how does he think society should even debate this issue, if it's seen in such stark spiritual terms?
Well, that leads to his argument about his own best argument against abortion, an argument he explicitly says does not require any unborn conceived or killed.
Interesting. So it sidesteps the usual focus.
Exactly, but focus on the damage to us all, to even accept that such a choice was somehow sane.
So the focus is on the societal impact of accepting the choice as sane.
That's his angle. He believes the public debate has been intentionally warped by what he calls evil, powerful entities, warped to prevent resolution.
How so?
By focusing everyone on the complex, abstract question of when a conceived life is worthy to have personhood rights, while strategically ignoring what he sees as the fundamental issue, the damage to us all to even accept that such a choice was somehow sane. He insists the real harm lies in considering it a sane choice in the first place.
Yeah, so he's trying to completely reframe the debate away from personhood arguments.
Seems so. And he connects abortion to specific sins, doesn't he?
Yes. He identifies the sins of pride, of godlike imagined abilities, and willingness to kill or support killing as more acceptable than demanding women take responsibility for their disordered acts, using sexuality for lust. They're seeking power, control, wealth, harm to fathers, or to sacrifice to Satan.
So a deep moral and theological framework for the motivations he sees behind it, far beyond just bodily autonomy.
Much further. And to illustrate his point about disordered sexuality and its consequences, he even includes the claim about women deliberately getting pregnant by multiple men to capture the wealthiest or most powerful regardless of the real father.
Okay, that's another quite specific and provocative claim.
It is. When an argument gets reframed so dramatically, like he does here, shifting from the unborn status to the sanity and spiritual motives behind the choice, what new insights, however unsettling, might we gain about the underlying assumptions, the objectives, on all sides of such a contentious debate?
It certainly forces a different kind of reflection. And faced with this comprehensive diagnosis of decay, spiritual and societal, what's his solution? What's his call to action?
Well, given this profound diagnosis, pervasive decay, spiritual warfare, his proposed solution is just as audacious as everything else he's claimed.
I can only imagine. What is it?
He states it explicitly in the journal. Quote, "I offer my services, as I have in my recent article, as your and all people's Pope King."
What?
Pope King, with every personal desire to be rejected, yet with a hope that I am accepted, and with God's will, bring about a reversal of this fall into hell that otherwise seems unstoppable.
Wow, okay. That is an extraordinary self-declaration. Positioning himself as this singular figure called to lead humanity out of the crisis he perceives, both spiritually and temporally. Pope and King.
Exactly. He details it further in another journal entry, apparently. It signifies his commitment to this comprehensive leadership role, to directly combat the satanic evil he sees engulfing everything.
And he presents it as a divine mandate, not personal ambition.
That's how he frames it. Willing to be rejected personally, but hoping for acceptance, believing it's God's will for him to reverse this fall into hell. It's a direct challenge. Accept his leadership as the path to reversal.
It raises a huge question, doesn't it? What kind of leader is called for in times of perceived widespread moral, spiritual crisis? And what does it mean when someone steps forward with such a unique, frankly unprecedented proposal like Pope King?
It's a lot to take in. And this audacious proposal, it's worth noting, he roots it in a very specific intellectual and spiritual tradition.
Which is?
He credits his ability to think and argue more clearly, to perceive these truths he talks about, to his traditional Catholic theology studies.
Ah, back to traditional Catholicism.
For him, it's not just faith. It's about getting a robust intellectual framework to understand the world's spiritual moral state. He sees this grounding as essential to seeing past that witch spell of deception.
And he draws on specific theologians.
Heavily on St. Thomas Aquinas, using Aquinas' definitions of how sin damages a person.
Auto.
Leading to, darkening of intellect, disordered priorities, faulty memory, damage of faculties, and acceptance to habits of sin. Classic Thomistic understanding.
Right, provides a powerful lens.
But then he extends it. He argues that a more rapid and deeper form of this occurs if a person is raised to accept insanities as right, normal, or even praiseworthy, especially, he adds, when unprotected by a father.
Connecting lack of fatherhood to deeper damage again.
Yes. This framework gives him a coherent explanation for what he calls the insanities acceptance, evil blindness, and disordered, retarded, and damaged mental faculties he sees in society, linking individual spiritual failings directly to widespread societal dysfunction.
And he found something specific in traditional Catholicism related to this, a certain kind of love.
He did. He says he found a level of assertion of truth without excuse, driven by what I now understand as fatherhood love, a true love that will force you to face truths and our personal failures.
Fatherhood love. Assertive, forcing truth.
Exactly. He sees it as a stark contrast to what he calls the womanhood weakness and strength he observed in the modernist false Catholic Church, which he thinks shies away from hard truths, embraces compromise. For him, this fatherhood love is the assertive, uncompromising love needed to confront evil and demand truth.
It's fascinating how theological frameworks, even very specific traditional ones, can provide such a powerful lens for interpreting societal changes, personal suffering, and in his case, even a path to universal redemption.
It really is. So ultimately, his overarching mission, revealed through the holy experience, the insights from the lion, it becomes crystal clear, doesn't it?
What is that explicit goal?
to warn others and advance the fight against Satan and bring about a reversal of this fall into hell that otherwise seems unstoppable.
That's his life's purpose, a monumental task he feels divinely compelled to undertake. The only way, in his view, to save humanity.
And he knows it might fail, right?
He acknowledges the high likelihood of failure, given the pervasive evil he perceives. But he says he must try, believing his entire life at this effort would be a small price I would willingly pay.
Wow. A testament to his conviction, his sense of duty, willing to sacrifice everything for this ultimate spiritual battle he perceives. It makes you ask yourself, doesn't it? What personal sacrifices are you willing to make when confronting what you perceive as fundamental evil, especially when the odds seem stacked against you?
A challenging question for anyone. And the author leaves us with a question, too, right at the end of the entry.
He does. A final provocative thought. He asks the reader, are these profound insights he shared divinely inspired or something that anyone, including the reader, could have done? Puts it right back on us. #outro.
Well, we have just taken an extraordinary deep dive, haven't we?
We certainly have. Into holy memories, navigating this powerful, really uncompromising narrative, spanning deep personal betrayal, global conspiracies, radical theology, and this fierce call to spiritual arms.
We've explored his intensely personal journey, all recounted through this Multiverse Journal.
From that ego death, the stripping of the family demon,
to his unique, frankly, astonishing interpretation of Cain as the lion, the supposed human template for Christ.
We looked at his staunch critiques of what he terms female evil, the modernist false Catholic Church,
and his fervent condemnation of abortion as sacrifices to Satan. It's a worldview that really challenges, questions, demands attention, whether you agree with any of it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. This deep dive reveals a worldview that is, well, by turns challenging, fascinating, and definitely deeply unsettling in its scope and its claims.
And we've tried to present it to you as it was written in all its complexity, drawing directly from that source material, always framing the author's unique, often inflammatory language as belonging solely to his specific framework.
Crucial distinction. We're reporting, not endorsing.
Exactly. And he concludes by asking, are his insights divinely inspired, or could anyone have reached them? Which raises, I think, an important question for you, our listener.
We do.
Given the stark claims presented here about evil, societal decline, profound spiritual intervention, what does it prompt you to question about the narratives you accept, the institutions you trust, your own understanding of the world around you?
It's really a call to examine your own assumptions, isn't it? Regardless of where you stand on his specific claims.
Precisely.
Well, thank you for joining us on this truly extraordinary deep dive. We hope it's giving you much to ponder.
Until next time.